Well, Tom, it's so nice to see you. Thank you for inviting me to this.
The pleasure is mine, and so is the honor.
So I've known you forever, it seems.
You have.
I've known you through many iterations. What led you to NOVAGOLD after Apex, South African Platinum, a few other things along the way, not to mention your other interests that are not remotely gold-oriented, but maybe they all fit together.
It may simply be because I'm shallow, superficial, but I am clearly drawn to the iconic. I'm drawn to beauty. I'm drawn to great assets, those things which really give me a sense of joy when I'm engaged with them. And that runs the gamut. So in my business career, I've had the great luck, more than anything else, of being able to either discover, in the case of silver, platinum, natural gas, or to take control of assets that are really category killers in their space, and which have almost always ended up being in the portfolios of much larger companies who ended up needing these kinds of assets to move the needle in their own reserves or production. There is something of a correlation when you look at my other interests too. So in art, for example, I'm drawn to Rembrandt. There isn't any list of the greatest painters of all time which doesn't include Rembrandt. And several other artists that I love. It's that combination of the intensity and the beauty. Similarly, with a passion that, for me, is even something that burns brighter than art, wildlife conservation, I've always been drawn to the big cats. Actually, all cats, big and small. There's something about the grace and the beauty and the power of the cats that has a certain charisma. You know, they are iconic. They're at the top of the food chain. And they're the umbrella species under which, if you save them, you've also saved all the flora and fauna in these critical ecosystems. So whether it's assets or whether it's other beautiful subjects, there is that commonality of the iconic nature. NOVAGOLD, in many respects, I think embodies my arc in the mining world. And as you were present at the creation, when I began my career in the 90s with Apex Silver, and through our own engagement in African Platinum, which was taken over by Impala, and indeed in NOVAGOLD itself, what my career has shown is, I would say, two very, very distinct features. The first has been the constant. The constant in my career has been this gravitational pull towards category killer assets. Assets which any larger company would want to own at a price if given the opportunity. I've come to believe that no matter how sophisticated a piece of paper is when you're doing a transaction and making an investment, at the end of the day, it's all about the assets. If you don't have a high-quality asset, but you've got the best kind of piece of paper, you're still going to lose money, and it's only going to be heartache. On the other hand, it's all about the asset stupid is sort of the philosophy. And if you superimpose onto those assets great management teams, then you can deliver outstanding returns. In silver, we had a 200x return. And that got me started. And then we went into platinum, in which we had a 100x return, and hydrocarbons, 100x return, sold everything in 2007 in order to pivot into gold and silver. It was the only thing that I really believed in. And I was lucky. We were able to make exits in hydrocarbons to Encana, in platinum to Impala. And so when we entered the financial crisis, I had capital and conviction. And whenever I have capital and conviction in something, it proves to be a lethal combination.
You say that's dangerous.
It is. It really is. Now, I had coveted NOVAGOLD for years. And I had watched it go from a 60-cent stock to $14, $15 when Barrick made a hostile takeover attempt in 2006. I didn't own it, so I'm not taking any credit for having owned it. You know, I fell into that trap that investors sometimes have. I missed it. Instead of realizing you do not make money looking in the rearview mirror. It's all about, can you make money on a going forward basis? And I watched companies, and shareholders reject the Barrick bid. Again, I didn't own it. But I did watch as it made a round trip. And at different intervals, I would look and say, maybe now is the time to strike. Now, what was it that so attracted me to NOVAGOLD? Donlin. I really felt that Donlin was the ultimate category killer. I had that sense that the Donlin trend could turn out to be something akin to the Carlin. Not necessarily the same kind of system, but in terms of, the next big discovery at Carlin would lead to another discovery. And when we realized that the 30, 40 million ounces that we could see in 2008 were on maybe 3 or 4% of the entire land package, those ounces were concentrated on a 3-kilometer area which had been heavily drilled, as well as being open to depth. When I sent my chief geologist to assess it, and this geologist, Dr. Larry Buchanan, is one of the great exploration geologists in the world. The Buchanan model is a textbook analysis of epithermal deposits that's still unrivaled to this day. And I sent Larry out, and I said, what do you think? And this was after we'd already made the deal, which gave us effective control. I said, okay, are the 40 million ounces there? And he said, oh, no. And for a moment, my heart sank. We're already in it. And he said, I think there's at least double, maybe more. In fact, I think that the next Donlin is at Donlin, which, if you're in the mining industry, it's an old adage. If you're going out in search of elephants, go to elephant country. Oh, right. And what he was basically saying was, in terms of the geological potential at Donlin, we were perhaps just scratching the surface. Now, this got me extremely excited because despite the fact that everything that I know about mining development and operations would fit very, very generously into a thimble. So when I got this conviction that NOVAGOLD was going to give me all the leverage I could possibly want to the underlying gold thesis, I realized we have a tiger by the tail. Now, up until that time when we came into NOVAGOLD in 2008, Electrum had perhaps the most widespread and diversified exploration portfolio in the world. I certainly was the largest holder of mineral rights in mining, or so I was told, in the Islamic world, from Mauritania all the way through to Pakistan. And it was one of the things that got me to open up doors and ultimately become partners with sovereign wealth funds from the Arabian Gulf. But around the time that we made the investment in NOVAGOLD, I'd come to believe that the era of go where the gold is mentality was coming to an end. Mm-hmm. And that ultimately investors such as myself would gravitate towards jurisdictions where the rule of law wasn't a novelty, where when you go to sleep at night, you feel completely confident that when you wake up in the morning, what you thought you owned the evening before, you still own. And therefore, I changed my mantra. So the mantra went from being seek out great assets that give you extraordinary leverage to an underlying theme to seek out great assets that give you extraordinary leverage to an underlying theme in a jurisdiction that will allow you to keep the fruits of that leverage when the time comes to ring the cash register.
Ultimately, we have in the picture, we have a big partner who owns 50%. So some of it would be the dynamics between the two partners. Do you think that can be monetized? And I understand a lot of this is unknown at this stage, but we know that you have a scarce asset. Gold is in itself scarce. So maybe you could just talk about the various things that would come into play. Will this particular asset outperform, let's say, their peer group?
NOVAGOLD is the flagship asset of the Electrum Group. We have interests in multiple gold and silver, hence the name Electrum, which is a naturally occurring alloy of gold and silver, in North America, as well as some exposure to Australia as well. For us, Donlin is the Holy Grail. And the reason I say that is because we believe that Donlin, as a vehicle for investors to be able to get true octane in the development space in gold, is unique. What does it mean to be unique? What it means is that when you look at Donlin's attributes, its size, there's never been a gold mine that began production with 40 million ounces plus. The scale, we're talking about something that could be a 1 million ounce a year producer. The mine life, it'll start with 30, 40 years. The cost structure, because it is a high grade mine for a large scale open pit, between 2 and 3 grams, it will be one of the lowest cost producers in the world. Then you have to take into account the fact that it's in the safest part of the world for which a premium should be attached. Before we entered into the go where the gold is mentality in the early 1990s, particularly led by Newmont's move into Yanacocha with Buenaventura, gold assets were pretty much valued as follows. U.S. assets were valued using a 0% discount rate because they were considered to be the safe jurisdictions. And if you had exploration potential, all the better. These were arbitraged against the risky jurisdictions, Australia, Canada, and South Africa. That just shows you how far we came, because once Newmont went into Peru, and then they went into Uzbekistan, and you had Barrick following suit into Chile, and ultimately looking for gold in Russia, and Freeport into Irian Jaya, etc., everything changed. And at a certain point, it came around to the assets in North America being valued lower than in these other jurisdictions because it was assumed that the constraints on permitting and environmental, et cetera, would mean longer lead times. So you were getting higher valuations for assets in Africa than you were in North America. When we pivoted away from the developing world into what we would call the safe jurisdictions, or now what would be known as the tier 1 jurisdictions, at least in my case, people couldn't say, well, Tom, you're talking your own book. You've taken a stake in NOVAGOLD, et cetera, et cetera. It's not exactly true. I'd become the largest holder of Moto gold mines at the same time. And we engineered the sale of Moto to Mark Bristow and Randgold and AngloGold. So we were still willing to take opportunistic bets in the developing world, but we viewed that as being a warrant as opposed to being a stock. The true stocks were US, Canada, Mexico, Australia. Now, when you look at NOVAGOLD, what you see is this combination, because of Donlin, of size, grade, exploration potential, production profile, cost structure, and superimposed upon all that, jurisdictional safety. Alaska is a state that welcomes mining. It is already the second largest gold producing state after Nevada. We're very blessed to have as our partners at the local level native corporations, the Calista Corporation and the Kuskokwim Corporation, and to have as our strategic partner Barrick. As a consequence, the level of professionalism that came from the NOVAGOLD team and the support that we had at the local level and at the government level in Alaska, and ultimately the federal government, allowed us to be able to do something that a lot of people thought would be too hard to do. We got a record of decision. In fact, the first time that the Bureau of Land Management and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers combined to provide a joint record of decision, something that so moved them that they had their own ceremony to celebrate the occasion. One of the great things about Donlin is that anyone who goes to Alaska, and Mark Bristow has now been there a couple of times and he's seen it firsthand, realizes the depth of support that we have from TKC, the Kuskokwim Corporation, from Calista, the owners of the mineral rights as well as the surface rights, but all the way through to the governors and to the senators themselves. Donlin is viewed as the flagship now for gold development in Alaska. When you combine all of these factors, what you have is a situation where I'm often asked, why do you say that Donlin is unique? The reasons are, when you look at the combination of attributes of this asset, you realize that there is no other asset in the world which combines the size. No mining project has ever begun production with over 40 million ounces. The exploration potential. Those 40 million ounces are only on 3 kilometers of a mineral belt that is 8 kilometers. And those 8 kilometers represent maybe 5% of the total land package. We're just simply following an old adage that if you're going to look for elephants, go to elephant country. There are only a few mines in the world that can have that kind of production, because the grade is already double, if not triple, what's coming online in the gold industry. Now, you take all of that and the fact that it's located in a jurisdiction that is already the second largest gold producing state in the Union, on land that is private and already designated by law for mining. What you see is an asset that, if we're right, could be the next Nevada, and already is poised to be the greatest gold story in the development space. The only other asset that compares to it is Sukhoi Log in Russia. And we wish them the best of success, but we would argue, I think, that we're on the right side of the Bering Straits.
So your partner has, to my way of thinking, been tone deaf on the issue of jurisdictional safety. You can observe that simply by where their assets are located. I don't have to go through the litany of where they are. Maybe something changed recently with your joint announcement with Barrick in terms of their way of viewing the world and their evaluation of political safety as being relevant in terms of where they spend their capital.
I think it's fair to say that Mark Bristow is without doubt, one of the greatest CEOs of his generation in the gold mining industry. Mark's experience is primarily Africa. I also have African experience in gold. I sold him Kibali, as well as platinum in Zimbabwe and South Africa. So I'm not Pollyanna when it comes to, my experiences there. I also made my first fortune. I got my first lucky break in Bolivia. So I do have an understanding of the opportunities that are present in the developing world. Mark's focus has always been tier one assets, assets that will make a certain kind of return, assets that are of a significant production profile, and all of the other attributes which Barrick discusses. I also believe in tier one assets. In fact, I'm even more stringent, certainly when it comes to what I'm looking for in an asset that can really move the needle in terms of production and reserves for a company. An asset like Donlin, for example. In fact, the mantra of our activities over the last 30 years has been great assets. Now it's great assets in safe jurisdictions. Mark's attitude, I believe, is that it's all about the assets, and even if those jurisdictions are challenging, he has the skill sets to be able to navigate those challenges.
Absolutely right.
And if anyone can do it, I think it's Mark.
He's the one, yeah. For sure.
So when we look at Donlin, I'm not sure that that indicates that he sees it from a jurisdictional standpoint. I think what I can say is that he understands and has said that to him, this can easily evolve into a tier one producer. I would say that being a tier one producer is absolutely critical in terms of being able to explain to investors why the long-term prospects of Donlin and hence NOVAGOLD are so good. But I would say that for me, as an investor, and I think I speak for our shareholder base, we want not only tier one assets, we want tier one assets in tier one jurisdictions. We want to be able to sleep well at night, knowing that when we wake up in the morning, whatever we thought we owned the night before, we still own. I think that what we're seeing with Barrick, as evidenced by the press release that we issued in December, is a recognition that Donlin is now very much part of their project pipeline profile in a way that it wasn't before. They were getting comfortable with it. Mark is a geologist. He is absolutely punctilious when it comes to geology. There was never a doubt that the gold is there, but Mark wants to be able to quantify how every ounce is going to come out over a 10-year period. And I'm the last person to gainsay such dedication to one's craft. But for me, this press release, I think, was a game changer. And I think that in the not too distant future, when gold reaffirms its bull market trajectory, we will be the go-to stock in the development space. NOVAGOLD's got all the attributes that investors will be looking for, and they will want octane in their portfolio. We've seen M&A in the gold space take out name after name after name.
There's a shortage of names
yes,
that are in safe jurisdictions, and it's hard to imagine capital is going to flow to Sukhoi log before it flows to Donlin, for example.
I would agree with you. So whereas we've seen analysts attached valuations of $10 billion to $15 billion on Sukhoi log, now that Barrick is starting to talk about Donlin, I think that the bell is going to start ringing. Remember, for 12 years, we've been in the story, and we have framed the narrative on Donlin. And we have, like the tortoise and the hare, taken this thing up the value chain, while other projects that people thought would go into production have, like the hare, fallen by the wayside.
Like a tar pit.
Donlin is on the path.
Not sure how patient I am on that sort of thing, but
look, we are now at the point where we have something which is pretty much permitted in a safe jurisdiction with great partners. We're in great shape. Mark sees this, and Barrick knows, even from experience in North America, a record of decision is a big deal. Barrick knows that being able to have a property that is private land designated for mining in an era when people are starting to talk about royalties on government land, this is a big asset. It's a big asset on top of what is demonstrably a very, very big asset. So my belief is that what we will see over the coming year is quite a bit of very, very positive news. The more we drill, the more we find. We say that Donlin is a gift that keeps on giving. And we've had some astonishing results, some of the very best in the gold mining industry. But there's also another factor here. For investors in NOVAGOLD stock and those who have relied upon me, Greg Lang, Melanie Hennessy, Igor Leventhal, other members of the NOVAGOLD management team, to tell that story, we're going to see a sea change. Because as exuberant and passionate as we are about Donlin, anyone who knows Mark Bristow knows that when he loves very, very deeply. And I believe that he will be falling in love with Donlin. He's already said that he's catching up with the Kaplan narrative. Now, I think after anyone that's been listening to me, that must be a terrifying prospect, because the fact that two of us will be doing that simultaneously is very good. Mm-hmm. So here's what I think will happen, which I think is so wonderful for NOVAGOLD shareholders. Number one, anyone from the sell side who follows the gold industry, follows Barrick, they're now going to have to look more deeply into Donlin. Some of them will be doing so in the context of following Barrick, which I really, really hope they will do. This is great news for Barrick shareholders, because I don't believe that the value of Donlin is reflected at all in the Barrick share price. Analysts, I believe, following Donlin already, will start to follow NOVAGOLD as a pure play on this emerging gold district. So we'll have more analytical coverage. I feel pretty confident about that. It's almost the law of averages, because
so you're going
why
from
not?
Almost none to potentially.
Right now we have two analysts following us. God bless them. We love them dearly. But even they, I would imagine, would love to see 6 or 8 analysts following us. Now, just look at the psychology of it. If you are already following Donlin because you have to follow Barrick, because it's, the 800-pound gorilla, then why not look at having a pure play on a great asset in a great jurisdiction? Why not? Some won't bother. Others will jump all over it. Now, that's number one. But number two is that as the Donlin story gets rippled through the market because of Barrick, some of that offtake is going to spill out onto us.
No.
And we're a company, we're a stock with very, very loyal shareholders who've been in it for a long time. Some of them almost as long as I have, and I've been in it for 12 years. I am more passionate about the story than ever before. They are watching this unfold. And in fact, we've had multiple calls from people saying congratulations with regard to the press release, because they understand that as Donlin gets more coverage, more investors will be looking for a pure play on the story, and you start to get a few shareholders taking positions, like the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia did over the last year or so. And it's a game changer. My agenda and Greg's agenda is that we will be the go-to stock in the gold development space. I believe that we're already there. But more than that, we want to be viewed as being the premier value and growth story in a sector in which the defining attribute is scarcity.
Where do you think, because this is an unusual, unique situation, where do you think NOVAGOLD should trade? And I understand that more analysts following it will certainly help. But theoretically, hypothetically, we have a long-dated call on the gold price. That's how I see it anyway. How, in your mind, and I'm strictly asking this from an academic point of view because I know you think and I think the stock should trade higher, but how would one analytically get to a higher price when, I guess, production will not occur until 6, 7, 8 years down the road? What are your thoughts on that?
I've always been a believer that at the end of the day, the money is made on having great assets. I've never believed that production in and of itself should be the metric on taking a position. To the contrary.
The way that's radical in the world of sell-side research.
Completely, but that's how I've made my living. If everybody adhered to the same opinion, I would have had far more competition in the space. So if you've got someone whose foremost credential to be in the mining industry is a PhD in counterinsurgency, then there must be something else going for him. And in my case, it's number one, I am probably the luckiest person I've ever met, personally, but also professionally. I've been blessed with surrounding myself with the best in breed, geologists like Larry Buchanan, specialists like Igor Leventhal and Ken Rye, and then being able to create an ecosystem in which we have this coterie of superior managements. So, for example, Greg Lang, before he joined NOVAGOLD, he was the president of Barrick North America for 8 years. He was producing more gold than Goldcorp. But he was also someone who had been with Barrick and its predecessor companies for nearly 30 years. Why did he leave Barrick to join NOVAGOLD? The reason was because, as he said, I wanted to go into the company that had access to being a pure play on what I felt was the greatest development story in the gold industry. And he knew it. Donlin came under his purview at Barrick. He was part of the team that made the takeover attempt in 2006. So he was an educated consumer, which, of course, as we know, is the best customer. And when he came in, he said, I will join as CEO if you join as chairman. And that's how I took the position. I very rarely join the boards of companies, even if I own 70 or 80% of them. My shareholders, those who follow us, know that I follow these stories extremely carefully. As they say at Fidelity, the owner lives above the store. I don't have to be on the board of NOVAGOLD. But I do it because I enjoy it. I do it because I am a huge believer in Donlin. I nearly named my third child, our youngest son, Donlin. So that's got to be indicative of the passion which we have for this story. But I do it because it's one of the most enjoyable gigs in the gold mining industry. I get to work with Greg Lang. I get to work with Melanie Hennessy. I get to work with Richard Williams and Ron Rimmelman and just really Dave Otterwell, a great, great cast of people, all of whom have this huge company experience but have come together to help build out what they all believe to be the greatest gold story in the space. When Richard Williams joined from Barrick, he had just taken into production Pueblo Viejo. That was the biggest gold investment Barrick had ever made. And when Victor Flores, who came to visit Donlin for John Paulson, asked him, why did you make that move? He said, because I want to be part of the greatest gold story in the world. That's a statement. Mm-hmm. And that is part of our DNA. We've all been together as a team for many, many years. And I enjoy it. I enjoy their company. Otherwise, I simply wouldn't do it. I wouldn't need to do it. That's for
certainly
sure.
Don't need to. One of the questions I think that crosses investors' mind, and certainly my mind from time to time, is this is a large capital commitment. Last count, I think $7 billion. I know it can be staged and maybe it wouldn't be that large. But from NOVAGOLD's point of view, whatever is decided, it would still be a major financial commitment. So I would be interested in your thoughts on how you will negotiate that particular issue. And I know there are many different ways to do it, but I kind of think it would be interesting to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I can tell you that I think this will be, when the time is right to go into production, the easiest gold mine to finance in Alaska with Barrick as a partner will be something where I think it can be done in several phone calls. Now, let's break this down. And I'm only using hypotheticals here. These are purely forward-looking statements and disavow all of them. So I'm just using round numbers. Let's assume that phase one of the project is $4 billion. Split two ways. That's $2 billion each. Obviously for Barrick, not difficult, but not difficult for us either. We financed a very, very prosperous silver project in Mexico, which we operate ourselves, not with the benefit of a major like Barrick. And we got 70% financing. Let's say that happens for us. What are we really talking about? 600 million, 800 million? Now, let's do something that investors very, very rarely do, but they should, which is to take themselves out of where they are today and their present mindset and understand what will be the conditions that will pertain when we're talking about going into production. I believe that gold will have embarked on the next leg of its bull market. To me, I think that will take us well beyond 2,000. I think ultimately it'd be 3,000 to 5,000. But once you see that gold has embarked upon that next wave, I think Barrick will be extremely excited to go into production. And I've always said, when Barrick is ready, we'll be ready. We have 3 sovereign wealth funds as our partners, and we're very, very close to them. And we've always had a number of major players in the financial space in mining who've always said, when you're ready, just let us know. For me, as the largest shareholder, what I want to see is that when gold prices are where they should be, when the mine is ready for prime time to be built, our share price, I believe, will be multiples where it is today.
One of the rationales for investing in NOVAGOLD is a belief in a substantially higher gold price, which is hard to come by these days outside of this room. I don't mind being lonely. My friends are well chosen. You did toss out 3,000 to 5,000, I think. What are some of the things that come to mind as to how we'll get there?
$2,000 gold, if you're a bull on gold, isn't really a number.
That's nothing.
It's nothing. And when I pivoted from energy to gold in 2007. Oil was heading to 120, 140. We sold our energy company when oil was 120. Gold had a 600 handle. And I gave all the reasons why I felt that one should be in a currency that can't be produced at will. And I think that gold and silver provided me with exactly the kind of exposure that I needed. When we sold our energy company, we didn't go back in because I told people I could no longer really comfort myself with conviction as to whether oil was worth $20 or $120. Little did I know that last year it would be worth, briefly, minus $20. But the one thing that I did know is that gold would multiply. And my long-term target for gold in 2007 was between $3,000 and $5,000 when it was at 600. So we're on our way. I mean, we've tripled since then. And something that I really want to mention to you, because you've brought this out in your own writings, the idea that you need to be a dollar bear to be a gold bull, it's not true. The idea that you need to be a bull on oil to be a gold bull, it's not true. You've pointed these out. And here's the proof. So in 2007, we got a wire transfer for $2.55 billion from Encana for the sale of our stake in Lior Energy. November of 2007.
You remember the date?
Oh, yeah. And if for no other reason, then I have no idea what would have become of us if we hadn't made that sale 6 months later. So one thing that I did was I looked around at where are we going to park the money? Well, dollar euro was 147. Today it's 113. Gold was 600-ish, and it's 3 times higher with the dollar having strengthened by 30%. So the concept that you have to be a dollar bear is not true. Oil, by definition, was 120 with gold at 600-ish. So oil is half and got even much lower, and gold is a multiple of that, which tells you this. First of all, gold has been the best performing currency in the world. Secondly, as a commodity, which is the way some people look at it, it's also outperformed. So when I look at gold, I see something that is an accident waiting to happen. And I love being long accidents. I think that we will see...
It seems to be asymmetric in terms of risk-reward.
Completely. So when I look at the gold space, I see no reason to adjust my 3,000 to 5,000 target. And by the way, I think that there will be days, ultimately, when gold trades peak to trough, the absolute price that it's trading today. Yeah, it would not surprise me to see $1,700, $1,800 days up and down. I think that we're going to see that kind of volatility. By definition, that means that gold is a great buy here, if I can say that with that level of conviction. I did that once before when I made that forecast in silver, which was trading at around $6, and people thought that I was nuts, and you had much greater intraday volatility a couple of years later, and the implication being that silver was much, much higher. So for gold bulls, I would say what we're seeing now is a correction within a long-term bull market, but 2,000 won't be the number. And if 2,000 gives me a $10 billion NPV for Donlin without adding any reserves, you know what? That's a very, very, very good investment.
Mm-hmm. This is probably a good time to bring up crypto, because I think crypto has sucked the oxygen out of the room for gold in many ways. It's been a headwind. And, certainly it has a generational aspect to it that guys at my stage of the game believe in gold, but if I'm your grandchildren, they might be buying crypto. Probably not yours. But what are your thoughts on that, on the competitive aspects of gold and crypto?
It reminds me of that famous exchange between Henry Kissinger and Zhou Enlai, when Kissinger was secretly negotiating Nixon's visit to China and the U.S. recognition of the People's Republic. And Kissinger, being a historian, asked Zhou Enlai what he thought the long-term implications were of the French Revolution of 1789. And Zhou Enlai famously responded, "It's too soon to tell." Now, I don't think that we need to be that long-term in our thinking to understand that crypto is a phenomenon. Cryptocurrencies are here to stay, just as automobiles were a phenomenon, just as airplanes were a phenomenon, railroads were a phenomenon. Most of those that were early movers ended up going broke. We don't yet know who the winner is. I personally think that it's likely to have a Chinese name attached to it. They're a larger trading partner with more countries than the United States is. They have, of course, phenomenal opportunity just domestically to be able to develop that market. And through the Belt and Road Initiative, they have a lot of other countries who may very well be open to that idea. What that means for things like Bitcoin or Ethereum, I don't really know. I am, I suppose, a true conservative. There was a professor at London University named Michael Oakeshott who once defined a true conservative as one who prefers present happiness to future utopia. There are many different forms of crypto. I don't know which of them will emerge victorious, whether we even know its name yet. I do know that there's only one gold. There's only one silver. They have their chemical definitions. They're called AU and AG, and that's it. So what we've seen in the crypto market, to me, is extremely bullish. In the same way as I view the scarcity value of Donlin to be one of its greatest attributes, I view the scarcity value of precious metals to be amongst those greatest attributes. Let's understand what the crypto phenomenon really means in its essence. It means that your narrative, the John Hathaway narrative, the Tom Kaplan narrative, has won. That is, we have seen gold and the reasons why people buy gold be adopted by the crypto crowd to the extent that in order to be able to induce people to look at crypto in the first place, people referred to it as gold 2.0. Now, for some people, that may be enough to be able to have exposure to crypto as being a currency that has limited ability to be reproduced. But there will always be enough people who are interested in gold. And I think, personally, that the acceptance of that gold 2.0 narrative is going to create a lot of arbitrage between gold 2.0 and gold 1.0. You know, the Chinese, the Indians, many countries around the world are still buying a lot of gold. Central banks are buying a lot of gold. Singapore, which is a bellwether central bank, bought gold for the first time in decades, but it joins a lot of other central banks. Now, to me, central banks are like insiders. They know the value of the assets that they hold.
Most of which are dollars.
Most of which are dollars, or now subpar financial assets that they've had to hoover up in order to sustain the global economy since 2008, 2009.
Right. Yeah.
So when they're buying gold, it's like when a museum buys a work of art. They're voting with their feet to be able to have some exposure to it. Now, I don't need people to have as much exposure to gold as to crypto. If we even had a fraction of the market cap of Bitcoin going into gold, gold would be at 20,000. But do I think that there's going to be some spillover effect onto gold as people say, well, maybe gold is undervalued?
Relative to?
Yeah, we've bought the argument for gold, but maybe it is actually undervalued. And it does cost something to produce that we can quantify. And so we just need some of that to rub off on a scarce asset, and gold will be like a bat out of hell. And one of the things that we've seen is that in today's world, when something's going up, that's when people really want it the most.
Want more.
So when gold goes through 2,000, hopefully on no news,
just a quiet day.
Just a quiet day goes through 2,000. It'll go to 2,100, 2,200, 2,500. People will start saying, I'll buy it on a pullback. And then it will pull back. And then they'll be afraid to buy it because they don't want to be the sucker who bought it at all-time highs. And then it'll go to 3,000, 4,000, 5,000. We see that, by the way, in cryptocurrencies. We see that in assets when they're in a bull market and they have momentum, and especially now where there's so much capital. So I think when you do see that $2,000 breakthrough, it's going to be enduring and the uptrend will be violent, which is just wonderful for us. And it's especially wonderful if you've got assets with great leverage to that in places that are not going to nationalize you, because now you're viewed as a strategic asset that should be in their portfolio. You want to be in a place where private property is enshrined constitutionally. There aren't that many.
Right. It's a short list.
And getting shorter by the day. They say that they don't ring a bell, but as we were discussing earlier, the go where the gold is mentality really began in the early 1990s when Newmont went to Yanacocha. I think that they rang a bell when Newmont and its partner Buenaventura weren't able to continue with Minas Cangas in Peru. There was almost unfortunate but poetic symmetry to the entire arc of the scramble for gold, regardless of jurisdictional risk. But we see it now across the board. In fact, in Peru, they just devastated a silver miner's stock on the London Stock Exchange.
Actually.
But this is happening now all over. And who needs it?
And it's kind of monkey see, monkey do. I mean, if one country decides to do a certain thing to get more of the economics, they're all going to follow in.
If your neighbor has just changed the rules, whether it's windfall profits taxes or local ownership or outright nationalization, and you're on the other side of the fence, you have to follow suit politically. It's suicide not to. If you're a dictatorship, people will be saying, well, he must be on the take of the mining company. If you're a democracy, your constituents aren't going to allow your national endowment to be plundered by foreigners when on the other side they've shown you can get away with getting more. So politically, regardless of your form of government, it's unsustainable for other governments not to join in. I often say it's like popcorn. Nobody ever eats one piece of popcorn. And I think that that's already begun. And so if I'm right about that, from an investor standpoint, it means that the 0% discount rates, the premium multiples, are going to be seen in those assets in safe places which are immune from that kind of confiscatory trend.
Well, Tom, one of the things that we spent a lot of time obsessing about, frankly, are costs. And in fact, we've interviewed many different managements, and one of the first questions is, what do you expect your costs all-in sustaining cost to be next year and the year beyond, where the cost pressure is coming from. And we're finding that in many cases, we're talking about 6-7%. Of course, there's no inflation. Of course, it's transitory. But in my mind, it's not. And obviously, that's one of the arguments for gold, is that inflation has become embedded and there's no way out. But when it comes to NOVAGOLD, we're a long way away from producing. How do you think investors will look at the profile of costs and the structure of the costs in Donlin when it starts producing?
First of all, as you said, we have the luxury, and it really is a luxury. My own experience in this space shows how being in developers can give you such a long runway to have opportunities to make money. But we are quite a while away from being in a situation where cost pressures today are going to have an impact on our valuation. The most important aspect that goes into determining what your cost of production is going to be is grade. And so therefore, all things being equal, ceteris paribus, if you have a company that is extracting 1 gram of gold per ton rather than 2 grams, or in our case, 2+ grams per ton, their cost of production is going to be double what ours is. Now, the grade profile of Donlin as a large-scale open-pit mine gives us tremendous advantages. It will place us at the low end of the cost curve. But let's, again, enter into the exercise of what does it mean if we have 5 or 6% cost inflation in gold mining by the time we're in production? What does that mean for the price of gold? Do you really think that gold will be at $1,700 or $1,800? One of the challenges that investors have, you don't suffer from this issue, is that they make the assumption in valuing something that the conditions upon exit are going to be the same as they are today. In other words, they don't game things out. What we always try to do is we say to ourselves, okay, hopefully we're buying when you have, as John Templeton would put it, maximum pessimism. Certainly the case when we came into NOVAGOLD. It was on the verge of bankruptcy, and we hadn't owned 1 share when we came in as a white knight and saved the company. And because of the exigent circumstances, we're able to go to 40% rather than having to take a takeover bid. I wanted to buy the whole company, but fortunately, I have around me people whose job in life, it's not just calmer heads, it's wiser heads. So in this instance, Comrade Igor Leventhal,
Dr. Niet.
Yes, Dr. Niet was whispering into my ears, as he was supposed to, "Thou art mortal, Caesar." So whereas I'd sold my energy company and was flush with cash and brimming with conviction on gold, particularly on the Holy Grail in my mind, which was Donlin, and then hence NOVAGOLD, he was saying, you know, you might think twice or 3 times about making a bid for the entire company, because everyone may be asleep, because it was December 31st, 2008, when the deal was signed on that New Year's Eve. But one of the most important things is that he said, look, you're in a position to buy the company for $2 a share. You have the cash. But Barrick tried to buy it at $16 a share. You don't think that they're going to walk you up dollar for dollar until they get to where they want? And it turns out that Barrick wasn't the only company that was hoping to buy NOVAGOLD on the cheap. There were others, including Newmont and even the Russians. And so we realized we have an opportunity to take control of one of the greatest gold stories in the development space, NOVAGOLD. But we would have to settle for less than 100%. And we ended up going for 40% fully diluted. That was the right move. The attributes of Donlin are that we are in a situation where the grade gives us plenty of leeway. Grades have collapsed over the decade-plus time that I've been in the NOVAGOLD story. We're now approaching 1 gram a ton for projects and going sub 1 gram a ton. At a certain point, particularly if you're not in stable jurisdictions, this is a real challenge. When we look at Donlin, which has multiples more than those projects, we know that we have a cushion. And if anything, the results of the drill programs over the last couple of years have given us, with great input from Mark Bristow, as a geologist, and the Barrick team, much greater definition on the controls on the mineralization. The Bristow of Barrick, or the Barrick of Bristow, is absolutely committed to wanting to know every single ounce that will come out over a 10-year period. And I think that that's a great discipline. I think you as an investor, I as an investor in the space, have come to understand that when people cut corners, the back end can be pretty brutal.
Right.
The more work you do in the front end, the more the back end will take care of it.
Now, we know that once Donlin is built, it will have been pretty well engineered. Costs will be known. Cash flow year X will be pretty much, other than the gold price, known. So,
look, we have an A team, and you have the Barrick side, of course, led by Mark. You have the NOVAGOLD side, led by Greg. Richard Williams built Pueblo Viejo for Barrick and, at the time, Goldcorp, now Newmont, and is one of the world leaders in autoclave technology. So when we look at Donlin, the amount of work that's gone into it, combined with the robustness of the asset and the grade, we're very comfortable in where the cost structure will be. But once again, when people tell me, well, you could have significant cost inflation years down the road, and I go, just tell me, like David Petraeus said in Iraq, tell me, where does this end? If you say that, then please tell me, where do you think gold is? Oh, no, well, we make the assumption gold is the same. Really? Then why are we even talking?
The average expectation on the sell side is 1,600 as a flat price deck.
Well, we are bullish on gold, and we want to be able to provide the premier vehicle for those who want, on a risk-adjusted basis, the most octane and the lowest risk in the development space for a Tier 1 asset in a Tier 1 jurisdiction. That's our mantra. We are gold bulls. And for those who aren't gold bulls,
go somewhere else.
Go somewhere else. One thing I've learned over the last 30 years is bears don't buy shares. And I will spend time talking to someone if they have 1,000 shares or they have 10 million shares. I enjoy it, clearly. And it's not because I have to do it. It's because I like to do it. Being associated with Donlin, to me, is like, being associated with Rembrandt or being associated with tigers. You're literally talking the best in breed in their space. That's not a hardship. That's a privilege.
Maybe this would be a good time to talk about sustainability. It's something that we, frankly, have become more and more involved in. And, of course, it has become one of the screens by which large capital will invest in the mining space. So I'd be interested in hearing how you look at that and what you're doing, what you still need to do in terms of the ESG side of the equation.
Well, fortunately, we haven't had to make any philosophical adjustments in the company for the last decade. Greg Lang, the entire management team of NOVAGOLD, and I have always been extremely committed to ESG on every level. And even before ESG became, a popular acronym, my own affinity, indeed passion, for wildlife conservation, and particularly for species which require entire landscapes in which to be able to thrive, like big cats, means that for me, the environment is not just second nature, it's actually first nature. So the first thing that my kids will associate with me is passion for wildlife. And I've managed to inculcate that in all of them. So I would never, ever be around anything that countenanced cutting any corners when it comes to the environment or sustainability. Social license, the environmental license, is existential in the mining industry. If you don't have great relationships with the communities, if you don't have great relationships at the provincial level, so that people have buy-in, so that they see that what you're doing is going to have a direct impact on their lives, and most importantly, on their lives and the prospects for their children, then you're going to go nowhere fast. Or even worse, you're going to build something and find that you have challenges. We don't have those issues. We've been very, very blessed in that our local partners, TKC and Chalista, are our most vocal supporters. And of course, the native corporations will all share in the benefits of Donlin. All of the native corporations in Alaska. That's the way the system works. So X percentage goes to those who are most immediately related to the project, and the rest is spread around the state. We have that kind of buy-in. As far as governance is concerned, we are, I think, a paradigm of an independent board. I've always believed that shareholders should have a significant say, even at the board level. I think that the transparency with which NOVAGOLD has conveyed its message in the media, in our annual reports to our shareholders, is at least as good, if not actually the best, of any company that I've encountered. I remember in my first mining story when we went public, I waived rights to be able to have more board seats because I felt having more independent directors means that you're going to get more independent points of view. The more independent points of view you get, especially if you're just coming into the space and you're in your 30s, the less likelihood you have of problems. That certainly pertains to the NOVAGOLD board. But more than that, we have gone out of our way strenuously to leave no room in terms of explaining to our shareholders what our strategy is. And I'm very proud of the fact that since the 10 years that Greg Lang and I have been functioning as CEO and chairman respectively, every promise that we've kept to shareholders, we've kept. Soon after we came on board, we did a capital raising at the beginning of 2012, raised over $330 million because of the enthusiasm of the combination of both of us and our relative skill sets meant. Well, one of the things that most endeared the investors to us was that we laid out very specifically what our plans were. We were going to spin off the company's copper assets. We did. The company is now called Trilogy. It's a very, very successful developer in partnership with South 32 in Alaska. We would sell our share of Galore Creek, not for the $40 or $50 million that people assumed, but for $200 to $275 million. We would therefore position Donlin as a pure play on the next Nevada through our vehicle, NOVAGOLD. So we felt we don't have headwinds. And in fact, we moved right through permitting, all the way through to a record of decision. So essentially, what you have is a company that articulates its strategy, is not trying to be all things to all people. We've never gone out of our way to say when we're going to go into production, for the simple reason that we've always said that the whole idea is to make money. And that required higher gold prices, because our job is not to be producing high-grade open-pit gold to subsidize Chinese and Indian consumption. When share prices are higher, we minimize dilution. And to our mind, certainly now, the shares are more valuable than the metal itself. So for all of these reasons, I think that we have an exceptionally educated shareholder base, which is one of the reasons why they've been very loyal to us. Obviously, as they say in Russia, fish rots from the head down. So, they at least see that in our case, the owners live above the store and are completely investor friendly because we're, in fact, the largest shareholders. We've got the skin in the game.
So now that you're positioned and you've sold Galore and you've spun out Trilogy, you're permitted, you've got the record of decision. What would you say are the next key events from an investor's point of view in 2022 and maybe beyond?
Well, I think that we just had a press release which was issued in December, and it lays out the joint strategy by Barrick and NOVAGOLD for taking Donlin up the value chain. We have a drill program coming up. It's very exciting for us, especially for me, because really my fortunes have been made through the drill bit. And I've always been a very strong believer that there's a lot more gold at Donlin. And in a bull market in gold, when you deliver exploration results that are positive, it's a very, very wonderful thing. So I'm looking forward to that. And I believe that the next step will therefore be a review of the feasibility study, which was last done nearly a decade ago. Right? Sure. A lot's changed, not the least of which is the potential strategy itself of doing it in stages. Ultimately, that will be determined jointly by the board of Donlin Gold, which is 50% Barrick, 50% NOVAGOLD. One of the things that I really have to stress, because it's one of our most attractive attributes, is that Donlin Gold, the joint venture, is a true 50-50, which means that no partner has one iota greater rights than the other. In practical terms, we've never had any dissonance between the shareholders, certainly not since the time that I've been involved in the story. We get along extremely well with Barrick, and the relationship between the management teams of Barrick and NOVAGOLD have never been better. And Mark Bristow and I have a relationship that goes back, over 20 years, and has been marked by successes in South African Platinum, where he was a director and I was the largest shareholder. I was the largest shareholder of Moto, and was able to deliver that to him when he decided that he wanted the Kibali project in Congo. And we've enjoyed really, really great relations. But very importantly, what you also see is that we're in sync. And the work plan which has been laid out is that something that is using very much Rand Gold kind of influences. In terms of news flow, we're hopeful about the next drill program, and we believe that that should lead to a decision by Donlin Gold to proceed with a review of the feasibility study. When we talk about the Donlin Gold joint venture, investors have to understand that the way that it was constructed was brilliant. Had nothing to do with me, so I'm not claiming, any credit for it. But before we came into the NOVAGOLD story, they had devised two 50-50 joint ventures on Donlin Creek, as it was then called, and Galore Creek. These are genuine 50-50s, which is why when Newmont came in to Galore Creek, they were able to join Teck as a completely equal partner. In this business, unlike in hydrocarbons, for example, that extra 0.1% and operatorship makes a big difference. Because we don't have any deficiency in that respect with regard to Barrick, should one day NOVAGOLD be the object of a takeover attempt, one of the most attractive attributes for an acquirer is that when they enter into the story, they are not subordinate to the existing partner. It's a true 50-50. They will both be jointly the operator. That is a huge selling point in this industry.
Not that you're for sale.
Not that we're for sale, but our job is to ensure that under any eventuality, we get the premium valuation for our asset. And if that means being the beneficiary of things that took place before we came into the scene, great. I think everything that we have done on our watch has positioned the company so that we are in a position to take this project with our partner Barrick up the value chain, to be able to finance the project, our aim being with minimal equity dilution. And if someone else is going to pay shareholders for the future in a way that is accretive and attractive, our job is to maximize that value and hence to maximize the valuation. I think that everything that we've done, but most importantly, everything about the Donlin asset has given us the attributes that whether we take this into production or someone else does, it's going to prove to be one of the industry's really, really great epic successes.